Welcome to another episode of Test Case Scenario brought to you by Sauce Labs. We're excited to bring you this brand new podcast where we'll be exploring the unpredictable and unconventional world of technology and business. My name is Jason Baum. I am your host as we delve into a variety of test case scenarios, but I don't do it alone. I do it with the help of our expert panelists. Joining me today are Marcus Merrill, Nikolay Advolotkin, and Evelyn Coleman. And together we are going to basically pick apart the latest trends and development in tech. We've got a packed agenda for this episode. Let's just go right into it, shall we?
Absolutely.
I need an answer, everybody. Shall we?
Go, please.
I was about to.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Hey, I was just wondering what is a test? Like, what do we want? What is that? What's the definition that we go off of when we say test? And what direction is that definition going? And I don't know, any other topics around that.
Well, we had a packed agenda, but I guess that's going to be our agenda because it sounds like that's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah.
If only we had some testing experts to talk about this subject to.
Right.
Or with.
Can we call them?
Yeah, let's call them.
Let's hit some up.
Phone a friend.
This is like I was just gonna say, anybody remember Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?
Yeah.
No, I purposely brought up this topic today because I knew that Nikolay and Marcus would have strong opinions on it, and I'd been talking with Jason last week, and we just use the word test so much, and I wanted to just drill into it. So let's go. Let's hear Nikolay and Marcus's definitions and see. I wish we could put you both in private booths and then hear one of your definitions and then hear the other one.
I love that idea. Hold
how
on.
about
I can
one
close
of
my
you
eyes.
has to leave.
I'll close my eyes while
I'll
Marcus
mute.
talks.
How about I mute?
Cheater.
You mute your speakers, and
Yeah,
I'll
there
give
you go.
an answer, and then I'll mute mine and see what you think. So hey, I'll give you a hand signal when I'm done.
But I don't wanna repeat what you said, you know.
No,
You will.
I don't think it's gonna be unique.
Jason, signal me when I get to 30 seconds, and that'll be Nikolay's thing to turn it back on. All right, 30
hold on.
seconds.
Let me get a stopwatch. We got to do this.
I'm going quiet.
All right, ready?
That'll be
On your marks.
All right.
Get set. Go.
It depends. Isn't that the greatest answer? Test is an umbrella term. It sort of means a lot of stuff, but I think the root is that there is something that has been created, and you're, for whatever reason, legitimate or not legitimate, you have a responsibility to put it out into the world, but make sure that it's safe and that it meets requirements before you put it out there. So there's a thing, you need to make sure the thing works. That is my broadest definition of test, and there are a million subgenres. In my 30 seconds, great.
You have hit 30 seconds.
All right.
I'm
going on mute.
Right.
Okay. Now, hold on. I'm waving my hand.
And Marcus can't hear us, right? Bitcoin mining. Yeah, he can't hear us.
Bitcoin mining is the best.
Yeah. He didn't. Nope. He can't hear. Okay. All right. So we heard Marcus's 30 seconds. Now let's get Nikolay's. Nikolay, I'm going to tell you when to go. Ready?
Marcus's seemed so entertaining. You guys were laughing. I don't know if he was just making jokes about me.
Yeah, that's all he was doing. He was talking
yeah.
about you the whole entire time.
That's what it sounded like.
Yeah. All right. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. Go.
So I think at a very fundamental level, a test is validating a set of inputs and making sure that they match to a set of expected outputs. So that's like testing in a very generic sense. You can have a set of inputs that are coming in from like a test method that you're passing into a test method, and then validating that test method is returning the correct values.
And stop. Sorry, you couldn't get in under
Nikolay,
time.
sorry.
I'm sorry.
Almost did the Wordle.
All right. Sorry, Nikolay, to cut you off, but it was
It's all
time,
good.
and we have to be fair to
I got the main
audience
definition
and
in. That's
sponsors.
all that matters.
Okay.
Sponsors, did you say?
Yeah, I don't know. Sounded appropriate. It was like a
Can't
game
wait to
show,
hear what I missed. This
you
is gonna be
know,
great.
like drink more Ovaltine. Okay.
Thank you both for participating in my evil experiment. I think you both you did speak on a very general level about testing. You both agreed that there is something that needs to be checked at the end, which I've heard, right? This is very important in testing. Whereas Nikolay started with an input and Marcus was a little bit more general. He said that something that needs to be validated. And so maybe discuss.
Hold on. Before we do, there's one thing we have not heard from, who technically have kind of made a part. We've kind of made this thing part of our podcast, like another panelist. We said so. I kind of want to ask it, so I asked ChatGPT.
It will make us look bad. That's the problem.
Yeah, so it already did. So let me ask it to dumb it down a bit.
Tell it to speak like a 12-year-old.
That's what I'm going to do.
Not like the knowledgeable thing that it is.
Explain.
Yeah, you guys will show it for
testing.
Sure.
Mine and Marcus's decades of experience will just go out the window.
Yeah. Okay. Ready? Here it goes. By the way, it answered so much faster than 30 seconds. All right. Sure. I'd be happy to explain testing to a 12-year-old. Testing is like checking your homework to make sure that you got it all right. Just hold on. Why is it using like over and because it's to a 12-year-old? I get it. Just like you don't want to turn in a homework assignment with mistakes, software developers don't want to release a program that has mistakes in it. So before they release a program to people to use, they test it to make sure it works the way it's supposed to. They try different things to see if the program does what it's supposed to do and doesn't do, and what it's not supposed to do. Sorry, ChatGPT, that sentence was, I get it, but they do this to make sure the program is reliable and won't cause any problems for people who use it. Think of it like a car that has to go through a test drive before it's sold. They test the car to make sure it works properly and is safe to drive. Software testing is just like that, but for computer programs. I'd argue, though, there's a level to if you are testing a car that I don't think you'd want to do in the test drive, like, I don't know, crash it. Yeah, but anyway,
good job,
ChatGPT. That was pretty parts of it.
What was the best answer, Evelyn?
Why am I the judge here?
It seemed like ChatGPT did an amazing job.
ChatGPT did a really good job.
Jason, did you ask it software testing or testing?
I asked it software testing.
Okay, all right, good. I'm glad that it didn't answer software testing for the general question of testing. Okay, good.
And that does bring me to a good point, right? Whereas not all the testing that we think about as automated testing, like, is necessarily, I don't know how to say this. Like, is it always, the definition of software is just so liquid these days, right? We say software developer, we say software engineer, we say coder, we say web developer.
Well, I mean,
software isn't something you just fit on a disk and download on your computer anymore. So does that change the definition of software testing?
Well, I mean, our own employer are we a software company? We have 5,000 mobile devices sitting in a data center. But are we a software company? I don't know if we want to get that meta here.
Or who's doing the testing? That's a whole other conversation, right?
Yeah. Well, the reason I bring that up is that, Marcus, your definition just said something was being checked, and it didn't really say that it was software. So your definition would work for that. And then, like I mentioned earlier, Nikolay's had something to do with input, which not all software has inputs, I guess. I mean, someone's inputting something, right? But some things just exist to exist. So are we talking about
UPS?
What level of input are we testing?
Exactly. It depends on the type. It's I think there's always an input and an output in a program, right? Unless it's just like a thing that I guess it could just be something that just spits out a sentence or a paragraph.
Like a transponder for an airplane or a GPS signal is only emitting signals. and it's up to the client to interpret those
Yeah.
signals.
Clearly,
So-
Nikolay doesn't grade a lot of coding bootcamp early projects where my website just sits there and does absolutely nothing. You would disagree about that inputs.
Web 1.0.
Well, you still put something in there that it displays, right? And so then the testing would happen around the what you put in. Is that what's coming out?
Yeah, the testing at that point is, is the web server capable of rendering what was put into it?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Is that specifically talking about testing code, though?
Depends on how you define code. See, we're getting so meta here.
Okay. Let me back up and ask my first question, which is, when you say what is testing and you're referring to software or anything for that matter, aren't you just basically saying, does this work?
Well, the one word that none of us said in any of our definitions, including our Lord and Savior ChatGPT, nobody used the word risk. It's not only about whether or not it works these days, it's about whether or not you are opening your company up to risks of something not working. It's not enough to say it doesn't work. It doesn't work, and here's the problem it's causing.
But isn't that a reason, not a definition?
Yeah, okay, yeah, sure.
I'm getting so technical on you just to make you two sweat.
No, I'm not going to sweat. I'm going to agree with you. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Oh yeah, there you go. Okay.
Well, I think maybe what Marcus is hinting at is that yes, testing has a definition, but maybe how you're doing your testing should be based around the risk model, right? And so that's what he's kind of hinting at, is like, yeah, we do it, but there's a spectrum of what types of testing to do, when, and whether it's even valuable.
Yeah.
Did we get a definition out of all this?
Yeah, the definition depends on the risk.
I don't know. I think Jason has a good. You make a good enough point for me, which is that definition might be irrespective of the risk addition or the reason. I mean, I just keep thinking about how when I was at Retail Me Not, I probably already told this story on this podcast that I was really proud of a team of Ukrainian software developers that I had I'd gone on vacation, and I left for a week, and I said, automate testing of the profile editing piece of the software. So you can make sure you can go in and change your avatar image, you can change your name, you can change your zip code, you can make sure that your preferences are updated, these different boxes are checked, and that those have an effect on what happens. And I did an amazing job. 200 Selenium tests. I came back from the vacation, and I was sitting at lunch with one of the analytics people, and they said, why did you basically spend X thousands of dollars getting these tests automated that only affect less than 1% of the people who actually ever use that part of the software? Why did you spend so much time on that? Literally nobody cares. We don't see a dime of revenue out of it. So we were testing to see if it worked. We were making sure that the thing we put out into the universe functioned according to requirements, but it didn't matter. So the definition stands, but the prioritization and the reason for the definition, not related.
All right. So whose definition's right?
I don't know if it matters.
I don't think it matters either.
I just like talking about the different facets of testing. I think that's what, I mean, you're listening to this podcast, you want to hear people talk about, how does this affect my work? You're going to have a similar, I think, semantic argument with someone who's been in the business for 1 year as someone who's been in for 20, which is, I'm not going to give you a perfect definition. Let's talk about what to do.
Yeah, I think, yeah, because we'd always rather live in actual tactical things, right? When we're actually like doing something with a tool, and that's just an easier concept, I think, sometimes to get your head around, rather than these broad, what is it? I don't know. Like, how do you define something without the definition that's been around for a long time, right? That's one of the hardest things to do.
You know who we haven't asked? Merriam-Webster.
Sometimes when I want to figure out the definition to something, it's like, how would I explain it to my child? Because they don't understand necessarily. Like, they get words, but they don't necessarily understand all the concepts. And so, like, if there's really something hard to explain, I just try to, I mean, kind of like what we asked ChatGPT to do, and it gave some great examples. Um, can we, if the next step after we define it is the next step trying to say like who tests?
It also might be what kinds of tests.
Yeah.
What isn't testing?
Like
what is testing not?
Yeah.
Maybe that's how we can come to a actual.
I feel like I'm way too steeped in this career path to even have any idea, because I don't think there's a part of my brain that isn't engaged with the question of testing whenever I use any app. The 4 hours a day I'm in my phone, it is always on. So I don't know when I'm not testing. Maybe when I'm sleeping.
I'd say that Merriam-Webster does mention a series of questions or exercises that I feel like exercises, yes, that is a type of input, but it's a very specific type of input that I feel like we should expand our definition to include exercises that we would put the thing through, as well as the inputs that we would put into it.
Yeah.
More simple inputs.
Especially like, so like if I'm testing a game, like that's a good one sometimes to think about, right? Because you have to go by like, is this, what was Marcus, you were telling me a bit about this. It was like, is it fun?
Yeah.
How do you test that?
Can you automate testing whether or not it's fun? And my answer is absolutely not. You can automate whether someone who had fun, where they're playing through that script again, introduced any new problems. But even if you play through that script and it worked the same way, you can't ask the computer, well, was it still fun? Like, I'm just going to blanket say, no, we are more than my lifetime away from being able to pose that question to a computer. That's my, whatever, my opinion.
Interesting. We can pose the question to a computer. We can pose the question to a human using something like an NPS score. And I would argue that things like visual testing, where even though the computer is determining whether or not something looks the same, because people can see things differently or hear things differently, ultimately we're still doing some kind of there's still some kind of testing needed where we get like a subjective opinion from a person using a survey. So there is a bit of a branch there that doesn't just involve asking the computer, but also involves asking an actual human. So when you ask the question, can we test if a game is more fun, and you do an NPS survey to see if it is, how is that different than asking somebody to do a manual test with their own faculties to make a determination that might not be able to be made by a computer? Is this blue?
I don't think that is different. I was actually going to say, to me, an NPS score is a type of test in that you're expecting some kind of experience and behavior from your event. And then when you're using the NPS score to gauge that experience and behavior, and hence afterwards adjust your programming accordingly to positively impact the score, which is like a test, like a performance test. You set a benchmark, you run your test against the benchmark. If it doesn't meet it, you adjust your application in order to meet that benchmark. Same thing with the NPS score.
I agree with Nikolay.
And I think Marcus made a great point. I've been trying to think here. I'm like, I don't know anything that isn't really testing if you think about it. Even us just using any application on a daily level, that's us doing user testing. And if we happen to find issues, we can talk about them or report them, or we don't have to, or we can just go through that experience.
I mean, I've just thought of kind of a bleak alternative to testing, where when I'm not testing, is this fan on my desk right here that's blowing cold air, or that lamp in the background that's got the lights on it, I'm just sitting here hoping they don't break.
Yeah, but that makes a good point. It's a bit of if the tree falls in the woods and there's no one there to hear, it doesn't make a sound, right? Like, yes, we're testing all of the software that we're using all the time, but is it a test if no one is collecting
Right.
the
Right.
Yes.
result.
Yeah. Okay.
And tests, can they be manipulated? So I told a story to someone last week actually about how the fact that I used to be part of the Arbitron family. Does anybody know Arbitron? Does anybody remember that? No? Arbitron ratings?
It's ratings, right? Like
Correct.
Nielsen.
Yes,
Oh
that's
my
correct.
gosh.
So Nielsen
Know what
for
that is.
television and Arbitron for radio.
Yeah.
And I remember at the time that I got the Arbitron box or Arbitron journal. These were done manually. It did not hook to your radio. There was no like measures of checks and balances. It was literally just a diary, basically.
Yeah.
And every time you listened to the radio, you were supposed to record what you listened to for how long. And, did you change the channel? Did you turn it off? Did you, all those things. And at the time, radio was going through some changes, and we had a channel that we had a station that was like constantly going in, going out, and it was the only alternative rock station in the area, and I was like really hell-bent on keeping it. So I literally just filled out the whole diary, basically like, yeah, I listen to that, you listen to only that over and over and over again. And I totally manipulated it. Now, this was a different time in my life, and that was not ethical. However, I really wanted the station. And I had finally the means to be able to have a voice in that. So it wasn't a survey. It wasn't intended to be a survey, right? I mean, it sort of is, but sort of isn't. And I manipulated that data, sure as hell did. And it was pretty bad. It was maybe not the best thing I've ever done, but
I mean, that was that. So I've had an internship at a radio station in 1989, and they talked about the Arbitron books constantly.
Yeah.
And the question was always, how much can we trust them? And there's evidently a formula. It's scientific. They have a standard deviation of plus minus 3%, which you gleefully added to that margin of error there, Jason. And they treated it as purely scientific. It wasn't even, it was more rigid than a survey.
I also had Nielsen, and Nielsen was an actual box. And that's that you could not tamper. You could not change the results of that.
Yeah.
The important question is, did you save the radio show?
No, it's still gone, and that's the thing. Yeah, I know.
Which is a good life lesson for us kids: is don't commit fraud, because it doesn't mean you're going to win.
You tried your best, and it didn't matter. There, the lesson is never try. I think that was Homer Simpson.
yeah. There, that was. I think that's what Nikolay was saying.
Oh, yeah, that's another good point, right? If you test something and you do record it, so first of all, we have to have the input. We have to have the acceptance criteria, whatever you want to call that. And we have to record the results. But the last step, I would argue, maybe the last step, maybe there's more, is what do you then do, right? So in Jason's case, he rigged the results. The radio station still went down. What did we learn from that? What changes are we going to make to the next time that we're doing this? And is that part of the test? Is it an integral part of the definition that you then decide to do something intentionally with the results? You might decide to ignore them, would be my argument, but you're intentionally deciding to ignore them.
Yeah, I mean, getting to a practical point with like actual software development, it probably isn't, nor necessarily should it be up to you what happens in that case. But I do think you should go into a project understanding what happens if it fails. That should all be agreed on team, I think.
Team, team, but sometimes we're just talking about like unit tests, right? So do you decide what you're going to do before you write like a tiny little unit test and go, if this fails, then I'm just going to throw my whole project out the window, or I'm going to throw this method out the window, or
I assume the answer is you fix the part of the code that failed the test, but I don't know. There's been a few projects I was on where I wished I could throw the whole thing away if one of my unit tests failed. Absolutely.
Oh, Nikolay's nodding.
Haven't we all? Yeah, I feel like it depends on the type of testing too, as Marcus said. Maybe with that's actually an interesting point, in that probably if you're writing like a unit test and it fails, you're likely going to fix the code that broke the unit test. I would find it very weird if you I mean, I guess I'm sure it's possible, but I'd find it very weird that you're deleting unit tests
Yeah.
that are failing. But maybe if you have like a test that is less believable, maybe you have a flaky UI test and it keeps failing. Maybe then you just say, hey, let's delete it. It's not providing us any value. Like, you know, I know I've seen some customer data where they have like a 50% pass rate on their tens of thousands of test results. You know, at that point, it's like, are you really analyzing all of those failures?
Right.
And if not, maybe then it's worthwhile to delete those tests.
Yeah, I mean, that's where we definitely get into different aspects of different kinds of testing. And unfortunately, there's this kind of expectation out in the industry that a unit test will always pass unless there's a real problem.
Yeah.
And a UI test, someone else will look into it. Might or might not mean anything, which at which point you are getting literally zero or possibly negative value out of your UI tests.
It might not even be considered a test. If the
Yeah.
test fails and no one's there to see it, is
Yeah.
it a test?
It's a set of steps that happened.
So that goes back to my question. What is not testing?
You know what? That's not testing.
Yeah.
Writing tests where you don't care about the result,
Yeah.
they might technically, by the definition, according to Hoyle, be considered tests, but they're not actually operating that way because you evidently don't care about the answer to the question or the result of the exercise.
So does a test then have to have meaningful, actionable feedback after it returns a result? Because if we're talking about like a UI test that a UI test, I'm doing in quotes, that someone wrote that nobody cares about what its result is, you know, then, and we're saying that's not a test, but then a unit test that will always result in something. And then if an action is taken, then we call it a test.
I think it's about, I don't think that you have to have actionable, like, I think you do have to have those things. But I just think that sometimes the action can still be intentionally not doing anything, but I think the intent matters.
Yeah.
Give me an example, because I'm not sure of when you would not act on a result of a test if it's actually a good test.
Well, we're not talking about good tests. We're talking about tests.
Tests?
That would be a different episode.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Like if you had a test that checked if something was blue or not, and you said, I care about the result, but I may keep it. It might just not be on the top of my priority list, and then it just keeps going down the top of the priority list. But it's you still care. You're just intentionally deciding not to do anything with that result, which is the action that you chose, was make a decision on whether I'm going to do something, is what the parameter set out.
And
I know
I
that's old.
Yeah, I don't think I'm answering the question necessarily, but I know that the knock-on effect of that, which I think people underestimate, is that you have represented to your team or your company that there's a piece of functionality that is covered by a test, but it's actually not only not covered, but you actually have no quantifiable statement you can make about whether any part of that works. Like you just it's a black hole of mystery, and yet you've represented that you've tested it. And that's what I see as the insidious nature of these tolerance for these kinds of tests. I'm calling them tests.
So who tests?
Well, I want to shake my pom-poms and say everybody tests, because that's what we say. Everybody's responsible for quality, and the truth is that that's actually a fact. That's a true statement. Everybody's responsible for quality, whether they want to be or not. You know, no QA person who sits there and does testing ever actually introduced a bug into the product. QA testers don't write bugs, right? So everyone is responsible for quality, whether they want to or not. Developers also write code that matches against awfully written or terrible requirements that aren't even right? So product sometimes has responsibility for the quality of tests. So in a way, everybody tests literally, and then overtly, that's a little bit more fuzzy, I guess.
Okay, question. If everybody tests and we're saying that we're testing all the time by like interacting with software and things, and let's say I'm playing with an app, I crash it, whatever. I don't care as a user, I'm gonna restart it. I didn't file anything, but there's something in the app that captures that information and takes it back to the developers of whatever this business is. Am I conducting the test by having exercised the equipment, or are they conducting the test by setting up the function by which the data is collected? Who's running the test?
It's a really good question.
I'm trying to find a reason to care.
Thanks, Marcus.
Apparently, Marcus does not like your question.
Sorry.
I really liked your question.
It's like I'm trying. Maybe I didn't hear it right.
Like, where's the line?
I just don't. I don't feel. I feel like if there's a big red flashing thing and the blue smoke is coming out of the machine, no one's going to say, "Well, who's doing the test?" It's like, no, all hands on deck. Fix it.
Well, yeah, but we're trying to determine what a test is.
I know.
So I think the question is valid for this particular topic of what is a test and asking what the test is, but why you should care. You're what's that?
Thank you, Jason.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anytime.
Sorry, I didn't mean that to be hostile.
Well, I get what you're saying because you see it all the time now in apps, right? Is like, what is it? It's like in the beginning. Well, sometimes they'll ask you like, are you liking this app? That's one way, right? And then another thing that they'll do is like, do you authorize like to send back data if there's an issue with the app? Okay, that's another way. And then yeah, so of course by just simply using it, you're essentially testing it. But are you, or is that initial prompt, right? That's what you're asking.
I don't know. Once again, I think I'm too biased. Too long in the career. My opinion is that yes, you are testing it.
Okay.
Whether there's an issue behind that or not, I think you are.
I don't know how to answer Evelyn's question, but the way I view it is what Marcus said, like we as users are testing it. And so in Evelyn's example, she was using an application, it crashed, there was data produced. So that's her output of her testing. How that output is analyzed and acted upon, like, I don't know. It's like, it comes back to how important is that output and how important is that crash. And Evelyn definitely tested. Does testing occur afterwards? I don't know. It's weird.
So we can agree that the user tested, but the intent of the person who created that capturing for that specific action, did they write a test? Because they wrote the thing that captures the result of an exercise. I was just the robot. So talking about like Selenium, right? Is Selenium the user in this case? I don't.
Yeah, I kind of think it has to go with intent. I mean, honestly, this is making me think about the metaphor of the gardener versus the carpenter, where the gardener is going to provide an environment and a fertile ground for whatever to happen that's going to happen, versus the carpenter who takes a piece of wood and just makes it into whatever the hell they want it to be with chisels and knives and stuff. So like, to me, if you're working on a video game or some huge app where you can't possibly test all the use cases, you're providing a garden and you're just sort of seeing what the hell happens and monitoring the result. Whereas Selenium is more of a carpenter's tool. It's all about intent.
Why doesn't every app just do that? Why don't you just basically throw all caution in the wind and let the users test everything?
Well, why
don't we do that?
I mean, I think it's a very good question. It's probably later in the whole later than I would expect discussion. But
Evelyn, Marcus likes my question more than your question, by the way.
I'm just laughing because I feel like that's how you get racist AIs. It's like just
no, and that's also
just throw caution to the wind. I mean, that's basically what they did, though, right?
Yeah, and then when you get that also gets us into what I think you could Google as the context school of testing, which has been around for 20 years. And that's also where you get into this horrible argument of checking versus testing, which I am not even going to go into. But then
I didn't ask.
Then this gets to this this thing of, oh my God, I've lost my train of thought. Just thinking about checking versus testing is just so enraging to me. But the fact that banks and space shuttles cannot just be let loose, right? Anything where money's changing hands, you can't just turn it loose. E-commerce, absolutely, you turn it loose. E-commerce, you turn on 1% of traffic that sees the new feature. If there's lift, you promote it to be the full feature. If there's not, you don't. You cannot do that with a bank, right? So it's all about context. What context are you in?
Unless it's like blockchain.
In blockchain, they just let the users do the testing.
I was just trying to throw in something else that frustrates Marcus to see if he like just reaches the like
Nikolay,
smoke
what
coming
did
out
you
of his
say?
ears.
I said in blockchain, they just let the users do the testing.
Yeah.
But, okay, yes, agreed. But Marcus, you brought up a really good topic, which is when you're just letting whatever happens, like when you're like, let's say doing A/B testing, is that a test or is it an experiment?
I call that an experiment to distinguish for marketing people. And I stand behind that, but I think it's a form of testing. It goes under the umbrella.
So wait, it isn't, but it is? Is that what you're saying?
Was part of
No, I'm saying semantically, I will distinguish an A/B test as an experiment just to understand in my own mind. When you talk to people and you say the word test and you mean A/B test, if you're talking to QA people, it gets confusing real fast. So I tend to use the word experiment to mean A/B test, to mean both paths could be correct, but one might be slightly better than the other, as opposed to a test, which is, this is broken.
Okay. That's a good, okay. So a test needs to have an outcome of either it's correct or incorrect. Is that what you're saying?
I don't.
I think so.
No, I mean,
that's what I heard anyway.
I can live with that. I can live with that.
Is that correct, Nikolay?
I think so. Where do you think that wouldn't apply, Marcus?
Well, like to his example of A/B, right?
A/B testing.
Yeah, but he's not calling that a test. He's calling that an experiment, and I agree with that.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a test because there is no predefined outcome that's correct. Instead, you're just gathering information.
I mean,
and I guess that's, but okay, testing fun again. Like, okay, the test is going to say it's fun or it's not fun. What if it's moderately fun? I don't know. Like, is there a gray area in a test?
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, I tend to think so.
Test?
I'm neither I'm neither an extremist, like see everything in black and white, nor am I someone who really loves getting caught up in semantics. So I'm going to say, it's kind of all like, as long as we understand each other, then I kind of don't care what you call it. If you Google A/B experimentation, you'll get a lot fewer hits than if you Google A/B testing. It's just the way people talk. And I just cannot manufacture a strong opinion about it.
Thanks, Mark.
I guess for me, it's less so about the AP testing and more about the definition of a test, getting back to that and like adding that caveat of a test can either be wrong or right. Like it could be either pass, fail, right? There's no in between.
In some tests, there's a range of acceptable behavior.
Yes.
So I'll give you a great example, a performance test, right? So you can do a front-end performance test on a web application, and there might be a range that is acceptable for your web application to live in. And if it's within that range, it's okay. If it's outside of that range, you act on it or you don't.
In the end, though, it is still green or red, right?
That's true.
Yes, for that particular test. But to Nikolay's point, with this range, you could have performance tests, and then all of those could pass because, why not make things faster, more performant, right? Your lower range is really like 0. Immediate satisfaction.
Yeah.
But then it could be too fast for the next test to capture its results, and then the whole thing is failed. So did those original tests actually pass? Sorry. Making everyone think.
I don't know.
We got layers of testing.
We're getting into test philosophy.
Yeah, that's why I said this could probably be a 3-hour topic if we want it to be.
I didn't know there was so many layers.
Yeah, I mean, because we've only even barely talked about functional testing, performance testing. There's also security, accessibility, infrastructure, chaos. I mean, there's so many different facets to this industry. Each could merit its own episode plus. Each could represent its own series.
So perhaps we do that.
Yeah,
Would everybody be interested in focusing on an area of testing each episode?
Be fine with me.
That'd be amazing.
We have a blog article we just posted about performance testing, and I owe CJ, our content person, an article about security and chaos both. So yeah.
Well,
Can a test lie to you?
Absolutely.
If you are testing whether or not something is perfectly centered, but there's an even amount of pixels available, and the computer makes, like, from a computer's perspective, it's as centered as it's ever going to be. It's going to say it's centered. It's like whatever the parameters of the definition of centered to the computer might not match the exact parameters of what the coding language or the testing framework determines as centered, might not match what a human would say is centered. So it could give you the answer yes, but we all know at a deep, deep level that it would be impossible for it to be centered. So with the test, is that still a test if there's a possibility the test could lie? Do tests have to have accurate results?
I'd like to bring this back to something you said earlier about net promoter score being a test. And I think net promoter score is one, there's a lot of debate about net promoter score. I actually happen to like NPS.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of debate about it being a metric that tells the truth all the time. Because when you measure those who are like detractors, for example, sometimes those who are more likely to detract will fill out an NPS survey than those who are more likely to recommend, and therefore, and then all of a sudden it gets completely thrown out of whack. So sometimes your score might be completely swayed in different directions. That's surveys in general, right?
Have you heard that piece? I don't remember where I read it. That 2-star reviews are far more actionable than 1-star reviews.
Yes.
Like, yeah. So I mean, it's a lot more thought went into it. Whatever. Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. I think that. Are you citing that as an example of a test that can lie to you?
NPS?
Yeah.
100%.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah, Arbitron ratings.
Yeah,
I think definitely lie to you.
I definitely want to. I'm curious to hear Nikolay's thought on this, because I think that there's two answers I've thought of, which is that as far as a test can, whether or not a test can lie to you, a test's expected results versus its actual results are all mostly what you deal with in software testing. Is I expect this to happen, what actually happened, and compare those two things. People make the mistake all the time, whether they intend to or not. No, they usually don't intend to, of actually comparing the expected results against the expected results, because they don't have enough command of the tools to actually understand how to extract the data properly at the end of the test. And sometimes I've seen people be super, super, super clever and extract a piece of data at one point in a test and then compare that against an actual result. And in the end, they end up doing it wrong, and they compare the actual results against the actual results. So the tests can literally never fail.
No, I don't understand this. Explain it to me like I'm 12.
I'm trying to think of an example in my career. I can't really. Just imagine you pull an entry from the database and says, I need this entry from the database to say 1, 2, 3. But the way you conduct the test sort of guarantees that it will always be 1, 2, 3 and can only ever be 1, 2, 3, just because of the way you handle the sequence of inputs. I really can't think of a better example. But you're testing the results of the outcome as though they are the input, and it's like
I don't know if I can make it any better than Marcus, because I'm also like trying to scramble here. But imagine if like you're trying to get back some data from something and you expect to get a true or false, right? And then you expect a true and you compare it to the information that you got back. But the information that you got back, the way you coded it with improper logic, you also get back a true. So now you're always comparing a true to a true, and the test will never fail just because you improperly extracted the data that you wanted to check. Does that do any help?
Yeah, no, it
That's
makes
really
sense. It just sounds really complicated for something you're
it's
telling
actually
people are
very
doing by
easy to-
accident.
It's
Right.
actually relatively common, I'd say. I've seen this.
Wow.
People make this mistake.
Because you end up over engineering something.
Yeah.
And then you go back and you try to fix something, but you end up messing it up. And then later on, you realize, I might try to think of an example. I've absolutely done this in my career.
Yeah.
The other thing that you can't, so that's saying that the test can lie to you because of mistakes you made. The other way the test can lie to you is that you're not in control of all the libraries that you depend on. And those things might lie to you. Like Selenium, for example, every browser is different in how it operates, but Selenium is, in theory, at least the same in how it extracts the information out. But there are cases where you might not understand differences in rendering, or used to be a bigger problem than it is now. But where the tools that you depend on, and if you're doing Selenium testing, you depend on literally millions of lines of code that you did not write. And if anything's wrong there, you might be getting a whole host of lies.
I thought of a future episode for us is the top test fails. I think would be a great future conversation to have, because I'm sure you all have. Oh yeah, there you go. I'm sure
I've got some locked and loaded for you.
Hey, we learn through mistakes, right? Yep. Or so we have spent quite a bit of time, if you could believe it, talking about this already, and I'm sure we could talk more and more and more. So we will have future episodes on this topic for sure. Maybe we'll dive a little further into each different area of testing so we can be more specific. But yeah, thanks so much, everyone. Do we want to close this episode with everybody saying a little something about maybe something to promote or something like that? What's going on with you, Nikolay?
So, Selenium conference at the end of March. I'll be there, and Marcus will be there, and I hope to see you all there. And also check out my show on the Test Automation Experience, where we have amazing guests such as Simon Stewart, talking about technical topics and test automation.
Fantastic. Marcus?
I guess I was going to plug Selenium Conference. I'm not even sure you're going to put the episode out before then, but I certainly would love the conference is a little bit undersold right now, and I really hope that people can make it out there. The other thing I guess I would promote is I don't know if I heard y'all. I said this already, but Fast Company published an article I wrote about how ChatGPT will not replace humans, and that is my opinion. And Fast Company thought it was a decent enough thing to actually publish it, so I'm very proud of that. I love that publication.
Great, and thank goodness for that. Congratulations on Fast Company. That's awesome. Yeah. And save the best for last, Evelyn.
I just wanted to wish everybody a belated Happy International Women's Day to all of the lady testers out there, for whatever testing means to you.
Happy International Women's Day. And with that, we have hit the end of our episode. I hope you have all learned something new. I know I have. Thank you to Marcus Merrill, Nikolay Advolokin, and Evelyn Coleman. We're grateful to have you as listeners, and please come back. Thank you to Sauce Labs for supporting this show, and we'd love to hear from you. Hit us up with an email, and until next time, have a great day.